Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson, a World Alternative Media here, and of course we are joined by Tim Picciott, WAM contributor, and of course from the Liberty Advisor. There's so much happening in the news right now, and it's impossible to keep up with, and honestly this report is already probably going to be slightly off because we're getting it up next day because there's so much stuff going on. But I wanted to first go into the fact that the Dow is going down. It's falling like a rock. Ever since a rate cut, it's fallen about 1,500 points. Today, as we speak, on August 5th, 2019, it has fallen 850 points. And obviously, a big part of this is the trade tensions, the tariffs, this battle between governments to manipulate markets the best and devalue the currency the best. And that's their form of competition, I guess. In the short term, it makes sense. Long term, it really destroys wealth. It causes vast poverty. It causes vast problems. We're going to get into that right away. But as a response to the tariffs that we've seen as of recently out of the Trump White House, China decided to devalue the yuan to below 7, which is the first time this has happened since 2008. And as this article says, U.S. stocks are cratering after China made a change to its currency that has dire implications for the trade war. And we're going to go to Tim right away. I just want to mention, we keep hearing Trump saying, the U.S. dollar is the greatest in the world, and people are repeating it. And, it's the usual stuff. A president says something, their supporters who are diehards repeat it, but don't actually have an opinion. This is basic economics. What is happening right now, whether it was Obama or Trump or Bush before Obama, whatever, when governments and central banks work hand in hand at centralizing the hell out of everything and devaluing currency, it hurts the populace the most. Now throw tariffs in on all of that, and it affects the markets dramatically badly. It hurts, your mom and pop farm. It hurts your mom and pop store, and it creates further problems that, then again, the government comes in and says, we have the solution to it, more of the same problem over and over again for eternity. It is absolutely crazy. But of course, again, as Trump says, we need to devalue the US dollar because it's unfair the advantage China has at devaluing their yuan. And it just gets to this point where it creates havoc in the monetary system as well as in the markets, and it hurts the consumer the most. Tim, let's talk about this craziness out of the stock market. We are seeing the Dow drop like a rock. What's going on?
Hey, Josh, thanks for having me back. And what's crazy about Trump's tweet before is he said that the dollar will always be the strongest, which is funny how, me as a financial advisor, if I were to use terms like always and guaranteed and never, I'd end up losing my job. But if you're the president, then you're allowed to say whatever you want to say. Mm-hmm. But basically what happened is that Trump felt emboldened by the stock market going up and having the Federal Reserve cutting rates on basically at his behest. And once he did that, and once the market was at all-time highs, then we get into this feedback loop that we discussed yesterday, where all of a sudden, the market's at a high. Well, now we can start, ratcheting up the tariff talk, and then when the market ends up crashing down, then we start talking about how close we are to a deal, and then it's this whole big cycle that keeps going on and on and again. Certainly since January of 2018, if you take a look at the Dow chart, it's basically just been yo-yoing for pretty much the past year and a half. But after Trump, after this new latest round of tariffs, and actually let's get into that. So this latest threat is to introduce a 10% tariff on $300 billion in Chinese imports not covered by earlier tariffs, an existing 25% tariff on $250 billion in Chinese imports, as well as duties on imported appliances, steel, and aluminum are already set to reduce economic growth by 0.3 of 1 percentage point next year. Now, what China decided to then do is say, okay, well, you guys want to, fight fire with fire. So what we're going to do is we're going to now devalue our yuan, or the renminbi, which is also another name for the yuan. And they devalued it to a level below 7, which that has not actually happened since 2008. So effectively, why this is important is imagine if, China devalues their currency 10%, and the tariffs are 10%, and effectively what you've done is you've now neutralized the tariffs. Now, I don't necessarily think that that's a great move if you're China, because, America being basically a deadbeat customer who's always paying you back with IOU notes, you're just making it easier for us as consumers here in America to then buy more of essentially your Chinese crap. But, the 4D chess in this could be, if you're China, the biggest, trump card, so to speak, not to make a little pun out of that, would be to ultimately kill off the dollar, because that right now is America's main power right now that we wield around, is the fact that almost all countries have to go through the dollar to buy different goods, especially if those goods are oil. And so,
well, Tim, we're already seeing that to an extent. We're seeing kind of a coalition happening between China, places like the Philippines, Russia, even to some degree, places like Iran and even Saudi Arabia. So obviously there is a lot of swapping happening. And obviously that's the only thing that's really holding up the US dollar right now, is that faith in the use by other countries, which essentially the United States is shooting themselves in the foot for, and China is helping them along.
Yeah, and you and John did a video, I believe, last week where it was even J.P. Morgan of all people were coming out and talking about how it could be
get out of the dollar, get gold.
I mean, when you see J.P. Morgan talking like that, then it's got to give you some sort of pause for concern. But ultimately, if you're playing the 4D chess and you're China, what this could do is you're going to send more global turmoil into the market. That additional global turmoil will then give the Federal Reserve more cover to then cut rates and not necessarily have to acquiesce to Donald Trump. So this is something I talked about in a video earlier in the year, potentially saying that Donald Trump could just be having all these tariffs talks is because he wants to force, even though he knows there isn't going to be a trade deal, he wants to basically throw the world into chaos, so then that way he can get his rate cuts, which then would ultimately then lift the stock market in his opinion. But there's going to be I have just so many reasons why there's not going to be a deal. I mean, for one, if you're China and what Trump is saying is, hey, you've got to elect me because I'm the best deal maker in the history of the world, and if you don't elect me, it's going to be sleepy Joe Biden making a deal. Well, if you're the Chinese,
sniffy Joe Biden.
Yeah, if you're Chinese and you've already waited this long to make a deal, then why don't you just wait another year and a half when there's at least a 50% chance it's not going to be Donald Trump? And then let's talk about people that are working, that are really influencing the election. I mean, Google influences the election basically more than anybody, and it's not just the things that they show you; it's the things that they don't show you. I mean, you go back to the Yellow Vest movement. I mean, Luke Rudkowski was covering that. I mean, it basically. Aside from him and Ford Fisher, I mean, basically you didn't see any coverage on that at all, especially on the mainstream media. Go back to the early days of Ron Paul. I mean, that's what really kind of woke me up politically, is when I saw, thousands and thousands of people that at a rally that I was at, and then, they show, one crackpot, guy with 3 teeth, and that's supposed to represent all the Ron Paul people who are.
Well, and at the same time, they'll have like a Hillary Clinton rally and 16 people show up, and they have all of them go behind the reporter, so it makes it look as though there's thousands of people at that event. I mean, it's obvious media manipulation.
Yeah, and then definitely you sent me a lot of softballs. I could keep going with that. But anyways, if you're the Chinese, you're not gonna make a deal right now, because the deal is, and especially a deal that Trump would take, because Trump keeps telling everybody how great this deal is going to be. It's the best deal in the history of the world. Just wait. Because if you go back to, a year ago, even go back to probably October. I mean, there was times where basically, it was a Monday and it was, hey, we're going to have a deal by Friday. And I remember even coming out with a video like on that Wednesday saying there's not going to be a deal when there was like a 99% chance the market was anticipating a deal. But the reason there's not going to be a deal, because no deal is going to ever live up to the expectations of what Donald Trump has already priced into the market. So, in business school, you're always told to under promise and over deliver. Maybe at Wharton, they're telling people to promise the sun and the moon and the stars, because right now, Donald Trump has just promised so much that there's no way in hell that it's going to be able to ever deliver. And so it would be a buy the rumor, sell the fact. And then so the fact would be a crappy deal relative to what he's promised, which would then also tank the market. So there's no way he's going to come out with a deal just to have a deal.
Well, Tim, this is where something like globalism comes in, because we have to go back to the history of China being propped up by the United States empire, and Kissinger meeting with Mao Zedong, and then Zbigniew Brzezinski propping up China via the Trilateral Commission, and this attempt to create not just being allies, but creating this massive trade shift towards China. I honestly think they're kind of like a guinea pig state, and they test things out before the United States now, like social credit, et cetera, with their cashless society. But with that said, so we do have a lot of Trump supporters that watch us here at WHAM, and I think it's important to mention to those people that maybe they haven't watched our most recent videos on this subject. Now, I'd like you to explain kind of, people will say, well, it's good for our nation long term for these trade tensions to happen, because these tariffs will help Americans back at home and all that kind of stuff. Can you explain to people that, feel that way, that feel like Trump is doing the best thing for America versus this entity that has given the U.S. a raw deal with the help of the American government to begin with? But can you explain to people why this is a bad thing for Americans overall?
Yeah, and one thing I do want to point out is that, I mean, I was not always some big Trump hater. I'm still not a Trump hater right now, but I am calling people out. I just, like to call it how I see things. And so I saw in, 2016 that the libertarian candidates were pushing gun control. I mean, you had Bill Weld talking about how we're going to be, how AR-15s or handguns are more dangerous than AR-15s. And that was my final straw of the Libertarian Party, at least that version of it. And I decided to create a website originally called Libertarian Advisor and a Facebook page called Libertarian Advisor to convince libertarians to vote for Donald Trump. And then my daughter was born on his first day in office, or as I like to call it, Obama's first full day not in office. And I was wearing a Trump shirt. I mean, I convinced was reaching millions of people leading up to the election. So I've stood out in 112-degree weather for 10 hours to go to a Trump rally, actually 2 different Trump rallies. So, I mean, to try to paint me as some guy with Trump derangement syndrome of, oh, this guy's just out here shilling. But the fact of the matter is there's been several things that he's turned his back on, whether it's, it would just take forever to get into all this stuff. I know we need to cut it short, but I just want to let people know, go back to check out all my stuff around the time of the election. I was the most pro-Trump guy there was, but mainly it was to buy us some time. I was hoping he was going to be strong in the Second Amendment. Obviously, that has not come to fruition. Some of the economic stuff I'm definitely not happy with as well. But why tariffs are not good is tariffs are a self-imposed embargo to yourself. It's we're the ones paying the taxes on this. And so if we raise tariffs by 10%, the companies have to then pay 10% when they import the products over here, which then means the consumer is going to ultimately pay 10% more. And now maybe they're able to stomach, small moves here or there, 5%, 2%, maybe they're able to stomach that for a little bit of time. But ultimately, once you get up to these 25% tariffs, they're not going to be able to stomach that. And so there's going to be gigantic repercussions. And it's also not like we can just, flip a switch and then all of a sudden we're going to turn on a bunch of factories here and we're going to just be, pumping out goods left and right in America, because we do not have the ability for that. And as you mentioned before with trilateral commissions, with the globalists, that the globalists have basically used America to then, siphon off its wealth and move it to China offshore to play basically countries off against each other, because, essentially, it's sort of like Game of Thrones where the average person is not, really benefiting from any of this. And so, people try to get really nationalistic and try to think as ourselves as, we're America. But at the end of the day, we're being played off by powers that are above us. I mean, I took out the domain name several years ago, Defeat the Globalists. I mean, I'm all, definitely tuned into what's going on.
But then it turns into, problem, reaction, solution, repeat, right? And I mean, nationalism is just a smaller version of globalism at the end of the day. It's all these states combined under this collective entity and this collective blanket of government. And while it's better than globalism, it doesn't justify the use of force in that national arena. But you bring up a lot of really important points, Tim, and I think it's important that people realize that, look, people will say, well, the jobs numbers are great. Well, that's something that you hear a lot from the Trump administration. You heard the same thing from the Obama administration. The truth is, it's nonsense. The economy has, quote unquote, been improving since 2008, though overall it's just been papered over with debt, so it's all fake and false. But at the same time, as far as the unemployment numbers go, it's worse than I think it's ever been if you counter in the labor force participation rate. We just did a video on all the homeless population that's growing at a vast scale, and it's absolutely alarming to watch how fast the homeless population is growing in all these places. And this isn't just the United States, it's elsewhere as well. And it's an issue of central planning, central banking, government policies, social programs, etc., where it just pumps up the same problem with the problem that created in the first place. Government and central banks and just this propping up of fake currency into the system. So
these recent job numbers, the big outstanding thing that beat expectations was an increase in government jobs. I mean, and so I once heard Doug Casey say, he actually takes the unemployment rate as he counts the regular unemployment rate, and then he adds up all the government workers too, because those are people that otherwise probably would be unemployed, because that's the only thing that they are good for is shoveling around, pushing paper in their government jobs. I also once heard somebody say that they said, 80% of jobs are going to be replaced by robots. And then somebody else said and came back and said, well, 100% of jobs can be government jobs can be replaced by pictures of robots, meaning that they're not even doing anything, half the time in these jobs. But yeah, right now, as we're talking, the stock market is down, about 770. The 10-year yield is at 1.74. So the bond market in many respects is even more prescient or even smarter than, because if you're lending people money, you want to make sure they can pay you back. And so, which, who the hell is, lending America money right now? But, the 10-year yield is at 1.74%. And so, it's below what the Fed funds rate is. I mean, that is signaling that we're going to have more cuts to the Fed funds rate. And the other thing it does is it pushes up the global value of bonds, because the bond price works like a teeter-totter. So when the interest rates go down, the underlying price of the bond goes up. And so I saw actually John Snyson posted on his Facebook recently, I think the global value of all the debt is at $55.3 trillion. Sorry, John, if I stole your thunder, if you're going to do a video on that later on. But anyways, we also see crypto, I think it was close to 12,000 or right there.
Which I think is a direct reaction to the interest rate drop that we saw a couple days ago.
Yeah, and then we have that, because it ultimately, the path is, and we had David Icke, over at Anarchapulco talk about, if you know the destination, you can see the journey. And so if the destination is there's no way we're going to be able to pay back this debt, and so what we need to do is have rates as low as possible or even negative, so that way we can, finance the debt at, just basically paying off the minimum payment to our overlords over here. You also have gold breaking out as well. I mean, gold is approaching 1,500. Last time I checked, it was about 1,468. And so you're seeing gold breaking out, crypto's breaking out.
We see some major moves, and I apologize for cutting you off. We're running short on time, but Tim, I wanted to ask you one final question here regarding the Dow. So we see the Dow crashing. What we've seen it crash more. We did a video back in December, obviously, talking about the dip at that time. What's stopping the Fed from, I mean, if you consider it from this perspective, the Fed might want to, compete against China, devalue the currency more. What's stopping them from just printing a vast amount of currency, killing two birds with one stone, and flooding it into the stock market via their $0 trading desk on Wall Street?
Well, nothing's stopping them, and eventually that's probably going to happen. And the only thing that's really stopping them is the fact that people can go on YouTube and see what these jerks have said in the past and actually see how they've been lying systematically since, I started really paying attention to all this stuff back in 2007. They've just been systematically lying ever since. And so at a certain point, I mean, to me, they've already reached the jump to shark moment when they had to acquiesce and actually cut rates, because if you go back to October, we were on autopilot. Things were going to keep going up and up and up. Greatest economy ever. And now, we just fast forward, a few months later, and all of a sudden now the rates are cut. I had a video December 28th where it was actually called "When's the Next Rate Cut?" And I said the next move is going to be down. There was a 2% chance of that happening priced into the market at the time. And everybody thought that was a tinfoil hat theory that could never go on. But what I was doing actually as a financial advisor is we had our clients buy into some put options. Most of them were in September before the market started going down. And so essentially what happened is our clients who were close to retirement saw their portfolios, over the past, year basically didn't really move a ton. But, people that weren't invested with me, what they would have saw is, if they were in the Dow, or S&P, would have saw like a big drop down, big move back up. And, it creates, a lot of uneasiness if you already haven't saved enough and you're already stretched. And so, right now, I think a lot of people are getting very complacent right now with what's going on. People want to be conservative. What they think is conservative is putting their money into bonds. But if you want to conserve your purchasing power, that's not the way to do it. And really do appreciate you having me back on. We will be having more videos with myself and John when Josh is going to be traveling. So I just want to, kind of reintroduce myself as well, as people are like, who the heck is this guy coming on here, and let guys know that Josh isn't going anywhere. But, he will be, probably pretty busy traveling in Europe.
Yeah, I'm going to a bunch of sites in Europe and trying to report on the news there. So expect lots of videos from Tim and John coming up. I'll tell you one thing. I mean, this market is great for insider trading. Man, I'd be making a fortune right now if I knew what's going to happen next in this current market. But it's so volatile. It reminds me of Bitcoin at this point. But there are more solutions than there are problems. For those watching, as always, it comes down to food, water, shelter, self-defense. So you're not gathering things for the toughest guy on the block, and of course, gold and silver as wealth insurance. In my opinion, not investment advice. It's meant as looking at this historic wealth insurance and protecting yourself against a crisis that will inevitably happen because all fiat currencies eventually revert to zero. And of course, there's cryptocurrencies that are sound, fundamentally useful, properly decentralized. I'm looking at the privacy coins right now, the ones that are actually useful. And again, in my opinion, but I think it's really interesting the times we live in because
I think the privacy coins, I think we're on the verge of them being banned at some point in the next year. And I think that when they get banned, the price is going to go up even higher.
Yeah.
That soon.
I think this is a very exciting time to be alive. So while there's a lot of things to be concerned about and you should know about those things, it's also important to realize those things so you can apply the right solutions. So of course, for those interested, you can check out thelibertyadvisor.com. Tim Picciott, of course, is a licensed advisor. I want you guys to make sure to check that out if you're interested. And obviously, there's lots of videos coming up on the near horizon, so stay tuned. It has been a cluster, lately. With all the stuff in the news, I'll be wanting to go to bed and like 40 news stories pop. We didn't even
get into any of the shootings because honestly, I don't want to give these. I mean, half the reason you've got these shootings is people are giving them attention, and so if copycats, and so we haven't even touched on any of this clickbait stuff. There's just been so much stuff that's going on. It's crazy.
Oh, yeah. The attention is always driven towards that which scares people and that which makes people subservient rather than the stories that, aren't making, profit out of tragedy. And a lot of these tragedies, unfortunately, are the symptom of a terrible monetary system, great poverty, other issues of the government, prescription pills, all that kind of stuff. We could go into all of that, and there's lots of issues there. But anyway, there's lots more coming up here on Wham, so make sure to stay tuned, press like, notify, if you even get notified, shadow banning, and subscribe and share and all that kind of stuff, and we'll be back at you with much more. Thanks for going into this with us, Tim, and until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson and Tim Picciott signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change. Like what you see here, Wham? Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated as we are so heavily demonetized and shadow banned to a crazy extent. We have lost about 80% of our reach since the beginning of this year as they rip away subscribers, etc. It has gotten out of control and it's becoming more and more difficult to stay alive here on World Alternative Media, bringing you guys free content every day. You can also check our Bitcoin address in the description as well as on the screen for you to scan if you please. And also check us out on all these other alternatives like Subscribestar, where we are doing subscriber only content for people at the $4.99 US a month tier and up. We really appreciate it. You could tip us on there and pledge anything, but from $4.99 and up, we are giving people subscriber only content that you won't find here on YouTube. And speaking of YouTube, there are so many alternatives for YouTube these days, including BitChute, which we are on at World Alternative Media, as well as, of course, the new flote.app, flote.app, where they are truly replacing all of these social medias, including Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Tumblr, Reddit, and of course, Twitch and Patreon, all in one place, and it is truly incredible what they are doing. We are moving over there in mass, as well as BitChute, BitTube, Steemit at Josh Sigurdson, all those other places, as well as PocketNet. We are on as well at World Alternative Media. There's so many options today, and we're trying to get into as many of them as possible because we need to back ourselves up. We are winning this information war, but we are getting to a point where they're cracking down more desperately than ever, and we got to do whatever we can to stay alive as it's getting more and more difficult all the time. We also have events coming up, including Anarchadelphia 2019, which will be in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in September. Check out thestateofanarchy.com and anarchadelphia.com. Linked below, use promo code WHAM, W-A-M, and save 10% on your tickets to this amazing conference as Anarchy is going viral. Also, make sure to check out the Winnipeg Crypto Conference in October. Also, use promo code WHAM, another great event with amazing speakers, and of course, Anarchapulco, the one and only, in February 2020, which you can also use promo code WHAM for WAM and save 10%. There's so many things that you can do to help independent media, including just pressing like, sharing, clicking the notification button, doing whatever you can to help keep this free information alive that's alternative to the mainstream. Anyway, until next time, Thanks for watching, everyone. This is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.
Thank you.